So doing a video version for my slicing, printing, and assembly notes here for ZS-V1. Just got a 3D printable mouse. Basically, it's like a Vaxee XE, but it has a lower front. As far as the weight goes, it's not supposed to be like ultra lightweight or anything. Our base mouse is the XE. The XE is like 78 grams, so you're looking at on the high end probably about 72 grams. On the low end, if you have ABS and use the lightest battery, 56 grams give or take. It'll probably vary, a good 2 grams or so, but somewhere in there is likely where you'll end up, unless you end up using, I don't know, the like ultra lightweight filament and doing all that stuff. So I've got my 4 little views here, some basic dimensions. You can check those out. I'm gonna have the print shape also linked. It's just not in here yet, but the print shape will be linked so you can just, print it out and see if it agrees with your hand at all first. Same thing with the Vaxee XE. That'll also be linked. Here's the XE overlaid. As I said, this mouse basically just has a lower front. Pretty much all the other stuff's the same. There'll be like minor variances. It's not a perfect thing. It's not like, I don't have the XE some like perfect matched model or something. So to start, usually I've been doing a fully conjoined top piece, whereas I have these like hinges and a full gap separating it right here. So basically this solves the problem where if anyone were to like grip very hard up top or push down a lot, if you push down into your mouse pad, or if you were to like pick up and reset and then push down like slam click kinda, you might accidentally actuate mouse 1 or mouse 2. This solves that issue because it kind of just decouples the force, unless I don't know, unless you're going crazy, I guess. But yeah, it wasn't an issue for me before specifically, but it's something that people have said in the past that the way they grip their mouse and stuff, it just wasn't a great idea or feature that like that could happen. So this fixes that. Basically, we've got these little plastic hinges underneath. Should print fine as long as you don't have really brittle filament. Should be totally fine. If you do, I have the steps for all these included. Also, every file is already pre-supported in its correct orientation. But like, check the slice before you print. But I have a version also that already has these thickened by like, 0.3 millimeters. You could thicken them, a little more even, because they don't really need to have that much play. They just need to work and attach, and then have just like a little bit of flex, which they do. Same deal with so basically in the effort of removing as much supports as possible, I have a little like conjoined bridge here. You just snip that off, use your flush cutters, take care of it. Otherwise, you're gonna be wondering why you can't decouple your M1 and M2, and that would be why. So I don't use supports for this area at all, but depending on how your cooling goes, this overhang where the side button punch out is might be a little dicey. So if you want to use supports, basically I just have these little extra areas that you can kind of fit your flush cutters in. Basically, to easily remove them. I don't support, the area in yellow either, but like you could, and then obviously you'll just be removing that. When we'll scroll down more, I'll show you I actually have how it is supported on the outside. So as far as the top piece, this is the orientation I print it. It is basically, straight up, which means you do need good adhesion. And I would recommend a brim, glue stick, whatever, all the whole 9 yards. You can add more supports. So you can see I support the bottom obviously because you need it. And then technically, if everything were perfect, you don't necessarily need these side supports or to go up further. I have them on there basically for stability, like just to have a little bit of extra bracing here. And then you're going to end up supporting that gap like I mentioned earlier, because otherwise obviously you're printing into thin air. You don't want that. Uh, this is the version that I print. They are not that hard to get rid of because you just slightly bend the mouse buttons forward and then get your flush cutters or whatever you want to remove it with and kind of yoink them. But there's a version that has more clearance. The problem is, let's say this gap, I think it's like 0.8 or 1 millimeter, and then the version that has more clearance is like another millimeter, and so it's easier to remove. Problem is sometimes it wants to generate these supports, and they just like don't print from my experience. So if you do see these on your slice preview, I would switch to organic tree supports. Also another note, I would change my top Z distance from 0.2 to 0.24 millimeters. That's what I do with basically all my supports, basically all the time. I don't have any issues with it. Makes them easier to pull off. Obviously, you're going to have some supports right here, and you want the minimal amount of scarring. You can always hit it with a heat gun afterwards too. But so you're generally going to have Arachne as your default wall generator for a lot of slicers right now, or a lot of print profiles, I should say. That's fine. The only thing is it kind of looks like you took a bite out of part of this just due to the way the line width is and how it generates the slice, since obviously we're not doing fully perfect curves. This is like fine, it'll print fine. It looks like a little funny, but you could do it. I would switch to classic. It's much smoother for this particular like piece. Shouldn't really be an issue. If you want to print it all in one piece too, the top should print fine on classic. You might notice that it gets aesthetically a little weird around where the gap is for the scroll wheel. So in that case, maybe you want to print them separate. You know, this one on Arachne, the other one on classic. But it also could just print totally fine. Kind of depends on what your default slicing widths are, basically. And then you can see, as I mentioned, I just do a little bit of support on those mouse buttons on the outside. I don't have any on the inside. And then, you know, you can always add more, and then you just have to basically clear them out. You can see I don't support the top overhang. It tends to print fine for me. And also what you can do is you can just like bend the mouse buttons a little bit, since that's the whole point of the hinge. You just bend the mouse buttons a little back and kind of clean it out with, you know, deburring tool or, you know, a razor or something. Obviously cut away from yourself if you use a razor. Don't get caught. Supports are dangerous. Wear glasses or, you know, eye protectors. So I've got this is kind of like a legacy thing, but I still include this in all the mice. These are like little loading pads. You can put a 5x2 magnet and slide it into place and then like glue it, like put a dab of glue from either top down or I have an opening on each other side. So most people don't tend to use them, I don't think, but you know, they're kind of free to include because the way that I have it modeled is, you know, you can have the magnet or you can screw up into it. Speaking of screws, you know, if you don't use the magnets, you will be using, you know, all these screws. You're gonna use screws to actuate mouse 1 and mouse 2. Same with the side buttons. So I found it helps. So you brace the side buttons with your hands, and then, you know, one hand, and then tighten it with the other. You know, you want to make sure you're screwing into plastic. It'll be fine. You're not putting a just don't put an insane amount of force in it basically, and just make sure it screws, and you know, you'll be fine. Just another view here. You will, of course, be using the actual screw post to secure the G305 PCB. I've just removed it so you can actually see, you know, what I'm talking about here. Just another view. Then as far as, you know, putting it all together, it's relatively straightforward. Obviously, you're going to put the PCB in with the scroll wheel first. And then here's how the battery is going to look. So basically with the battery, you know, pretty simple. It basically only fits one way. It's a tight fit there. I have it as a two-piece design. I originally did it as a hinge, but it's like, I don't know, kind of annoying to print. Doesn't really need to be a hinge. You're not going to be opening and closing it that much. This is like a snap fit. It works fine. Basically, just put the positive end with the like smaller. You'll see them. There's more room for the spring basically on the other side. So you know, put the positive end over here. Put the spring on this side. Be very careful with them because, as they say in bold letters here, they are very fragile. They are. They have the smallest egos you've ever seen, and you will break these wires if you're not careful. I've broken a ton of them. And then afterwards, just loop this like piece, like you. So set it up like this, like in the picture, and then the connector, you're gonna loop through that gap, and that's just so that you can pull the top off without, you know, risking basically destroying the wires and, you know, having to solder them back together. And this is just how I set up the 675. Same deal, you know, you're just be careful with the wires. Basically, you're gonna load the spring. I put it like halfway down, and then I just put the battery in, and I push those down with the actual other connector, and it fits all nicely. Because it's annoying if sometimes you put the spring in first, then the battery, you kind of have to like squish in there and like push like extra hard. So that's why I do it like this. I've got links for all that stuff if you want. Here's the internals when it's fully assembled. You don't have to screw in the side buttons. They just slide in and it's pretty sturdy. Shouldn't have any issues with that. Then obviously just, you know, you're going to screw in the PCB, you're going to screw in the mouse buttons. Make sure they lay flat too. It's just something to note is, you know, if they don't lay flat, then it'll slightly change how the switches actuate, which I don't know. Maybe you like it. Who knows? And then, you know, here's our final product. Like I said, about 72 grams. Not the lightest mouse. It's not a complete brick, but you know, the people who like this type of mouse are most likely, you know, the people that like the Vaxee XE, which is, as I said, a heavier mouse. So thanks. I'll post links to like, you know, the Etsy files and the shape and then the XE shape and all that jazz.